All right, welcome to Book of Revelation, chapter 8. Tonight we are going to go through what the half hour very plausibly means. I'm going to show you the weight of evidence for that. Also, the seventh seal, chapter 8, has the first four of the seven angels blowing their trumpets. Just angels. That's better. Let's do this. Let's show you. All right, Revelation 8 verse 1. When he opened the seventh seal, there was silent, the Greek here is sige, in heaven for about, well, some translations say for about half an hour, other translations say for the space of half an hour. The Greek word there is hos, and the hour part is himerion, okay? So hos himerion. So let's look at the word silence first, sige. It actually means to like hiss at somebody to tell them to be quiet. It's like hush, like shh. To command silence is where the basis of this Greek word means. So it's not just that there is a silence, it's like it is a shh, be quiet, all right? Then it says that this hush, this command to be silent, lasted for about the space of half an hour. That's where they get the word hos, from the Greek hos. But it's very unlikely to mean about or for the space of. It actually, hundreds of times, gets translated as in the context of it's like another thing. For example, Matthew 6 verse 10 says, thy will be done in earth as it is in heaven, which means like, like it is in heaven. And you can see there I have the King James Version translation count, how many times the word hos has been translated as, and it's been translated there as for 342 times. And pretty much never for the space of. There's 14 times where it gets translated as about, but for the space of, pretty much never, except for this once. So this is really a doctrinal type of tie-in where they try and work out how something could be half an hour. So if it's half an hour, no problem. It must be for the space of half an hour. So that's how they translated the Greek. Because it can't be like half an hour. So it must be something else. Sometimes the word hos gets translated as when, especially when it's a timeline. And the word when there usually means during its occurrence. Now that's sounding a little bit closer. In Matthew 28 verse 9, we have a verse there. It says, and hos, and as they went to tell his disciples, behold, Jesus met them, which means while they were on their way to tell his disciples, Jesus met them. Okay, that is a better translation there of hos. So what is the half an hour? Himerion. So it's only mentioned once in the entire Bible as half an hour. It doesn't really occur anywhere else. So they have jumped to some conclusions about this, but we can do better than jump to conclusions and try and understand it, especially with the amount of information that's now available from different Greek sources. All right, so this is going to take a bit, but stay with me. Himerion. The noun of it is actually hora, and hora describes a time interval of indefinite length, but it's a natural manifestation that can be clearly observed in nature, which means it's not just a way out non-physical term. It is something that's observable in nature, like a year, a season, or a month. It could be a day or even parts of the day that are observable. Like, for example, morning, noon, afternoon, evening, but it's never brought up when they're talking about centuries or a millennia. All right. So hora, the noun, is very specific of a natural, observable time interval. All right. It actually comes from the, if you look at languages and study languages, it's called a PIE, which is a Proto-Indo-European root. The PIE dates back thousands of years, and a lot of languages, European languages, have come from it. And its actual root is year, from which we get our word year. All right. So contrary to the word chronos, which refers to longer periods of time, the noun hora was mostly used to indicate specific points in a time-based cycle. For example, bedtime. All right. So bedtime was known as the hour of going to bed. Since all businesses occurred during the day, for ordinary people, the day had 12 hours, but the night did not. Okay, so you can actually read that in John 11, verse 9, where he's talking about the hora, the working day. Now, in Greek mythology, the word hore were actually lush female deities in charge of seasons, not 60 minutes. Okay. So the word hora isn't 1 hour. It's very rarely an hour. It's about a season or a period of time. Now, here's the cool part. Hora, when you put the prefix hemi in front of it, it means half. And then you have a full word, hemerion, which means half the period. Okay, so not half an hour, half a period. And I gave the credit to the guys who are the deep Greek thinkers on this, Broom Publications. So half an hour, probably unlikely. Half the period, very, very likely. And we gather that from a lot of language history. Anyway, so the Great Tribulation had begun, and heaven was quiet for this last half of the hour of the trial of temptation. And we see that in Revelations 3:10, where Jesus is talking to the Philadelphia facet of the menorah. And he says, because you have kept my command to persevere, I will also keep you, that's tereo, to attend to, well, it says to keep you, but the Greek word tereo means to attend carefully, means to guard, like you would for a garden. If you tend to a garden, you keep the garden. That's what the Greek word there means. Tereo, it means to tend to it. So because you have kept my command to persevere, I will also attend carefully and guard you like a garden from the hour, there's that word hora, of trial. The word trial in the Greek there is perismos, and it's not just a trial as in front of a court case. It is proving of temptation. All right, and I'll just get to that in just a minute, but it's not really a trial where someone's on trial. It's a proving of temptation, and it says that I will keep you, guard you, tend to you from the hour of trial, which shall come upon the whole earth to test those who dwell on the earth. All right. Some people have said that perismos here is judgment. It's like, no, God's going to keep that church from judgment. It's like, okay, that's fine, but why is nobody else kept from judgment? Yet we see clearly that there are many who are saved through this tribulation, not just Philadelphia. So it can't be about just judgment, all right? And you see the same word here actually in Luke 4, verse 13. It says, now when the devil had ended every perismos, he departed. So was Jesus being judged? No, he had a trial of temptation. So you can't put perismos with judgment, all right? I guess the question could be, some people say, have they been raptured? Or are they simply protected in the land of Goshen? That is up for debate. Not tonight, though. Okay. But the land of Goshen, for those who have just come on board, there were 10 plagues in Egypt. Everybody endured the first 3. And the last 7, Israel was protected from and didn't have to go through it. All right, Revelations 8, verse 2. It says, and I saw the 7 angels who stand before God, and to them were given 7 trumpets. Revelations 8, verse 3. Then another angel, having a golden censer, came and stood at the altar. He was given much incense that he should offer it with the prayers of all the saints upon the golden altar which was before the throne. All right, this is cool because the golden altar which was before the throne is exactly what Moses saw in heaven. Okay, in fact, we know that the tabernacle, the entire tabernacle that was created in the wilderness during the wilderness experience of the Israelites as they tried to get to the promised land, the whole tabernacle was fashioned after what Moses saw in heaven. And John is confirming here that Moses did indeed see the throne room. So this isn't there's a nice golden altar. He's saying, no, also that yes, this golden altar really is before the throne, just like Moses said. And we read that in Exodus 31-6, it says, and you shall make an altar to burn incense on, and you shall overlay its top, its sides all around, and its horns with pure gold. And you shall put it before the veil that is before the ark of the testimony, before the mercy seat, all right, that is over the testimony, where I will meet you. So this golden incense altar was right before where we meet with God. Okay. And Exodus 40:26-27 says, and he put the golden altar, okay, that's the one we're talking about here, in the tabernacle of meeting in front of the veil, and he burned sweet incense on it as the Lord had commanded Moses. And then again we see in Hebrews 8 verse 5. It says, they serve in a system of worship that is only a copy, a shadow of the real one in heaven. So the writer of the Hebrews, of the book of Hebrews, is saying that yes, Moses saw all of this in heaven and just simply duplicated it here on earth. For when Moses was getting ready to build the tabernacle, God gave him this warning: be sure that you make everything according to the pattern I have shown you here on the mountain. All right, Revelations 8 verse 4. And the smoke of the incense with the prayers of the saints ascended before God from the angel's hand. 8 verse 5. Then the angel took the censer, filled it with fire from the altar, and threw it to the earth. And there were noises. The Greek word that is actually phone, which is voices, right? Like we get our word phone from it, right? So voices, there were voices, thunderings, lightnings, and an earthquake. So the censer filled with fire from the altar, we've seen this before. This is a perfect picture of wrath and compassion. You've heard me say this before. Anytime you think of God's wrath, you have to think about the fact that it's also full of love. It's also full of mercy. It's full of judgment. It's all of it. God doesn't just change between emotions. So here we have a censer filled with fire from the altar being thrown on the earth, and you think, well, where is the compassion in that? Well, in Numbers 16 verse 46, we read, Moses said to Aaron, it's the same wording. He says, take a censer and put fire in it from the altar. Yeah, it's the same wording. So he put incense on it and take it quickly to the congregation and make atonement for them. For wrath has gone out from the Lord. The plague has begun. So God, whenever he is throwing his wrath onto the earth, he is also making atonement for them. Okay? God is full-natured, merciful, and full of wrath at the same time. All right. So because the altar and its coals represent a burning away of sin. It actually represents a cleansing and a purifying. And we see that again in Isaiah 6:6-7. It says, then one of the seraphim flew to me, having in his hand a live coal, which he had taken with the tongs from the altar. And he touched my mouth with it and said, behold, this has touched your lips. Your iniquity is taken away, and your sin is purged. All right. So even here, again, it sounds terrifying. fire being thrown from the altar, but this is wrath and mercy in one. Revelations 4 verse 5 says, and from the throne proceeded lightnings, thunderings, and voices. And in Revelations 8 verse 5, we have the same words. There's lightnings, there's thunderings, and their voices. Why? Because at this particular moment, we now have heaven reaching earth. And it would be terrifying. Because it reached earth, there's earthquakes now. Now, it's interesting to note. Did I go too far? No, it's fine. It's interesting to note, remember in Revelations chapter 7, where the 144,000 were marked. It's interesting to note that after some are marked as belonging to God, it's actually fire from the altar is quick to follow. So last week, Ezekiel 9, 4-5, we mentioned that the Lord said to him, go through the midst of the city, through the midst of Jerusalem, and put a mark on the foreheads of the men who sigh and cry over all of the abominations that are done within it. Okay, and that was then joined and explained in relation to Revelations chapter 7 and the 144,000. But now, the chapter straight after Ezekiel 9, which is obviously Ezekiel 10, it says, then he spoke to the man clothed with linen and said, go in among the wheels under the cherub, fill your hands with coals of fire from among the cherubim and scatter them over the city. Okay. So here we have now in chapter 8, a similar experience. So you've got people being marked, and then you have literally fire being scattered over the city in Ezekiel 10. But now in chapter 8 of Revelations, we have fire being cast not just on the city, but on the whole earth. But it follows the same storyline. People being marked and then fire being cast down onto the earth. In Revelations 8 verse 6, it says, so the 7 angels who had the 7 trumpets prepared themselves to sound. Revelations 8 verse 7, the first angel sounded, and hail and fire followed. This is interesting, mingled with blood, and they were thrown to the earth. And a third of the trees were burned up, and all the green grass was burned up. All right, hail and fire. If the sun and the moon darkening wasn't enough, Israel will immediately know that indeed God is part of this. They will know it immediately because they have been taught for generations that hail and fire is part of the curse that happened on Egypt. All right. So in Exodus 9:23-24, we read that. It says, and the Lord rained hail on the land of Egypt. So there was hail and fire mingled with the hail. So this is probably a sign to Israel. You know, it is the first trumpet. This is probably a sign to Israel that God's vengeance has truly begun. And that would be a massive wake-up call to them. Besides, obviously, seeing someone put the abomination of desolation up in the temple. But this is where they begin to really realize, yeah, God is in this. Now, it's mingled with blood as well, which didn't happen in the plagues on Egypt, but it does here. So it could be literal blood or metaphorical, but it's interesting to note how this actually might be connected to the atonement. Remember, I just showed you earlier that Moses said, you know, get fire from the altar and you go out and make atonement for the people. Okay, so because the wrath of God is also his mercy, and we do see that in Numbers 16:46. All right. So Moses said to Aaron, take a censer, put fire in it from the altar, put incense on it, take it to the congregation and to make atonement for them. So we're probably seeing here again, hail, fire, and a form of atonement because God is multiple natured and can't help himself. Whenever he does wrath, he desperately wants to atone as well. Now it says the trees were burned up and all the green grass was burned up. There is obviously a time frame here because we read after this event that the trees and the grass do grow back in Revelations 9 verse 4, which we'll discuss next week. this is in Revelations 9 verse 4, it says, they, scorpion like locusts, were commanded not to harm the grass of the earth or any green thing or any tree, but only those men who do not have the seal of God on their foreheads. So there's probably quite a bit of time going on between the trumpets. Yeah, basically there's time going on between each trumpet. It's not one after another. There are some scholars who believe that all the trumpets happen pretty much immediately. I would think that no, there's actually time frames between each of the trumpets. Revelations 8 verse 8 says, then the second angel sounded, and something. Now the reason why something in every translation is in italics is because that word, it's nowhere, okay? There's no single translation that has the word something, but it does have the word hos. It basically says, and like a great mountain, the Greek there's oros megas. So something like a great mountain was burning with fire. It was burning with fire, and it was thrown into the sea. And a third of the sea, the Greek word is thalassa, and that became blood, hama, where we get like things like hematology and hemophilia, right? Hama. But it was something like a great mountain that was burning with fire and was thrown into the sea. And a third of the sea became blood. And Revelations 8 verse 9 then goes on and says, and a third of the living creatures in the sea died, and a third of the ships were destroyed. Okay, so let's analyze this. Something like, hos, like, or as, a great mountain, oros megas. It's not actually a mountain, but it is huge. The Greek word there for mountain, which is oros, means any kind of rising out of the earth. It can include hills as well. But this was something big. Now, some suggest that this is a very large meteor burning with fire upon entry to Earth's atmosphere. In fact, possibly, or one possible reason that 1/3 of the sea dies is due to poisoning. The poison is troilite. Now, troilite is a rare iron sulfide, which is sulfur, that's actually abundant in meteors. So it could be that a large meteor hits the sea and the sulfur in it kills a third of the sea life. It's also possibly the reason why 1/3 of the ships are destroyed because of a tsunami. Now, this could be an international event, but it's most likely localized because of the Greek word that's next, thalassa. So that means sea. Now, even though the context is unclear, there is debate as to whether or not this sea is all of the oceans or the Mediterranean Sea or the Red Sea, or maybe it's metaphorical and it's just about the sea of people. Considering this whole story of the book of Revelation is Jacob's trouble and the lead up to it and its outcomes, it would be most plausible to simply be the Mediterranean Sea, that this large mountain-like object lands in. The blood here, it could be a physical change, like maybe it's real blood, just like we read in the first plague in Exodus 7, or the blood here means death. Revelation 16 verse 4. And considering how metaphorically creative the book of Revelation is, blood simply may mean things have been poisoned to death. You know, talking specifically in tonight's thing about maybe it is meteor iron sulfide reacting with the water. And I've actually got a picture there of the Ethiopian sulfur lake called the Dalol crater. And you can see how it's reddish and it can actually look like blood in some places. So a third of the ships were destroyed. Now, some scholars will point out that in World War II, there was a total of 105,127 ships used in the war. And pretty much exactly 1/3 of them was destroyed. That's 36,387. So there are some scholars who believe that this particular trumpet has already occurred and that it occurred during World War II. And then you go, well, what about the first trumpet where it was hail and fire? Then they will point out that in World War One, hail and fire could simply have been the scorched earth policy, which is what they had in World War One. All right. Anyway, I got that source about the ships and how many were destroyed actually from a salvage company in Massachusetts. Yeah, so they know exactly how many ships entered the war, and they know exactly how many were destroyed. And it's just interesting that, yeah, it is close to 1/3. But is that the prophecy already being fulfilled, or is that like another echo or a spiral of prophecy? Revelations 8 verse 10, then the angel sounded, and a great star, Greek word there is aster, it fell from heaven, burning like a torch, and it fell on 1/3 of the rivers and on the springs of water. And Revelations 8 verse 10, the name of the star is wormwood. Absithion is the Greek word. 1/3 of the waters became absithion, wormwood, and many men died from the water because it was made bitter. Firstly, the star part, the Greek word aster, it is probably from the Greek word, or the root of it. The root of aster might actually be stronio, and it means spread over the sky. So anything that's spread over the sky can actually be called a star in Greek. And it is used in Revelation 6, 8, and 12 about strewn sky objects that are falling. I remember Revelation 6 verse 13, it says that the aster fell from heaven. In Revelation 12 verse 4, it says that the dragon drew 1/3 of the stars from heaven and threw them down to the earth. And that could actually be related to missiles that fall from the sky, because it still fits the definition of things that are strewn, that are spread over the sky. So it's not just necessarily heavenly bodies. Now, the plant for which wormwood is named is absinthium. There are some drinks called absinthe because they're bitter, and it is a known biblical metaphor for things that are unpalatably bitter. Okay, so wormwood generally means bitter. And we see that in Lamentations 3 verse 15, where it says, you have filled me with bitterness. He has made me drink wormwood. And Amos 5 verse 9, you who turn justice to bitterness, wormwood. So it could actually be a heart condition, or it could be poisonous. Now, some speculate that this star is an atomic device. Okay, that it's not just a star that falls from heaven, but it's actually an atomic device, and it's related to wormwood in Russia. For those who know some modern history, on the 26th of April in 1986, there was a nuclear explosion in the Chernobyl, Ukraine nuclear plant. Okay, but Chernobyl means wormwood in Russian, so that, you know, they actually named a nuclear power plant like after wormwood, and it did actually pollute the land, the waters for hundreds of miles, turn the water bitter, and it did kill humans, animals, and fish. So is this a prophetic warning that this is the kind of fire that will kill people and poison waters? I mean, is God warning us that it's going to be a nuclear event? Or maybe the third trumpet has been blown? I would suggest that no, this is probably that the Chernobyl incident was just another echo. It was another spiral of prophecy. In Revelations 8 verse 12, it says, then the fourth angel sounded, and 1/3 of the sun was struck, 1/3 of the moon, and 1/3 of the stars, so that 1/3 of them were darkened. 1/3 of the day, 1/3 of the day did not shine, and likewise the night. All right. This is different than the 6th seal. It is getting worse, but it's not a complete blackout. All right. It's the third part that throws people. So I'm just going to give a theory or an option for you to investigate. So think of the vast changes of temperatures that will occur firstly, okay, if only 1/3 of the day shined. and how the change in temperatures and how they will affect human health and food growth. It is possible that this particular judgment is temporary as well. For the fourth bowl judgment that's coming up actually ends up reversing it. And we find that the sun's power becomes incredibly intensified. That's in Revelation 16, but that's for later on. Now, if this darkness was cosmological, okay, then the darkness during the day, so let's just say a third of the sun was actually wiped out and there was darkness for a third of the day, then the darkness at night would be 2/3. Okay, so if you've got a day being reduced to a third, then obviously the darkness would be now 2/3. But we don't find that. We find that a third of the day didn't shine, and likewise the night. Now, this is unique, and it's probably that the rising and the setting of the celestial bodies, in other words, 2/3 of their visible travel, is probably blocked out by smoke. So there's absolute pitch black for a full third. All right, so it's getting darker and darker, and then all of a sudden it's really just black. Because a third of the sun was struck, a third of the moon, a third of the stars. And some people suggesting that that is where you see the sun and the moon on the horizon, that you won't be able to see it because it's blocked out by smoke. All right. In Ezekiel 32, verse 7 to 8, it says, when I put out your light, that's the wrath, I will cover the heavens and make its stars dark. I will cover the sun with a cloud, could be smoke, and the moon shall not give her light. And all the bright lights of the heavens I will make dark over you and bring darkness upon your land. Now, this is interesting. This happened on May the 21st, 2020. So this year, Beijing went completely black at 3:30 p.m. in the afternoon. Not just one source, this is multiple sources that experienced this, and a lot of people took photos. Interestingly, it was happening when the parliament was getting together and making some very big decisions that may have been anti-godly. But yeah, the entire sky blacked out. Now, the news reports were saying that, oh, it was a rainstorm. But a lot of the articles who interviewed the residents were saying, this is in Beijing, they were saying, we've never, ever seen the sky turn jet black at 3:30 in the afternoon from a rainstorm. Okay, but this is probably more what's going to start to happen as we move into end times. Right. Revelations 8, verse 13, it says, and I looked and I heard an angel flying through the midst of heaven. I do know how to pronounce that Greek word, but it's tough. It's Mozeranium, if I think I've done that right. Anyway, I'm not going to say it twice. Anyway, saying with a loud voice, woe, woe, woe to the inhabitants of the earth because of the remaining blasts of the trumpet of the three angels who are about to sound. Now, the Greek word, okay, here I'm going to go again, Mesoranima, yes. This is actually the highest point in the heavens. So this Greek word specifically means where the sun occupies a position at noon. It's where everyone can see it. So in this case, the reason why the angel flew through the midst of heaven was it identifies that the angel was in a location where everybody saw him. And it means that everybody gets to hear and see it. So it's not just flashing through heaven. No, the highest point, the most visual part of the sky, the angel stands there and says, woe, woe, woe to the inhabitants of the earth. So they aren't like naive to what's going on at all at this point. So woe, woe, woe. The last three trumpet plagues are known actually as the last three woes because of this verse. So people are like, woe, woe, woe. Oh, there's three more woes. Okay. But you don't really see that anywhere else in the book of Revelation. But anything repeated 3 times is actually called an installation. It is strengthening, means complete. It depends on the context. But having 3 words repeated will often mean permanent. And we can see that in Ezekiel 21:27, where it says, a ruin, 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 I will make it. It means it's going to be a permanent ruin. So this woe, woe, woe means it's going to be a completely permanent woe. And we also see there that Daniel prayed 3 times a day. Jesus pleaded through prayer 3 times. Okay. So it's 3 is very important, especially in the context of permanency and completion. All right, Revelations chapter 9 next week. We're going to go through the 7th seal, which are the 5th and the 6th angels blowing their trumpets. That's what we're going to see next week. And then it's going to get more and more weird and wonderful after that in Revelations 10, 11, 12, and then lots of things happen.